Hello, good evening, everybody. We still have a couple of people who are joining us, but in the meantime, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Rebecca Hinden, and I am the director of the Day School Initiative at the Jewish Federation of Greater Metro West, New Jersey. Many of you already know our federation, and that's why you're coming to us this evening. Some of you are coming to us from our day schools. No matter what brought you here, we're so happy to have you. We want you to know that Federation can be a resource for you and your family. And so throughout the program, my colleagues are going to share some of the Federation resources that we have available to you using the chat feature on the side. I just want to take a minute to welcome David Saginaw. He's our president of Federation. Hi, David. I see you there. Thanks for joining us. And to all of you, thank you so much for coming this evening. The Day School Initiative is a collaborative investment to enhance academic excellence for every educator and every learner, and to make the experience more affordable for families at all 4 of our Greater Metro West day schools. I encourage you to learn more about our day schools, all of our 4 day schools at njdayschools.org. Tonight's program and the program that we have coming up, which you'll hear about later, are just some of the features of investment that we have and partnership that we have with our 4 day schools. And so if you like what you see, please be in touch with me or my colleague, Jerry Russo, in order to get more information. I want to take a minute also to thank so many of our teachers who are on the call tonight. Our teachers at our 4 day schools have truly been heroes. Can you just give us a little wave? If you are a Greater Metro West teacher, I see you. Please give us a wave. We are so grateful for you, for everything that you have done. As a parent myself, as the director of the initiative, I am so grateful for you. And I know my colleagues and the parents who are on this call are as well. So thank you for everything that you have done this year. You have truly made our lives better. Thank you, thank you. And to parents who are joining us this evening, you're here for the same reason that I'm here, and I'm excited to hear Sophie. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, and good evening, everyone. I'm Justin Rosensmolin, and I'm manager for Quest for Teaching Excellence at Jewish Federation of Greater Metro West, New Jersey. And welcome to When Your Help Isn't Helping with author, speaker, and mental health advocate Sophie Riegel. As parents, teachers, and other caring adults involved in the lives of young people, we often struggle to find the language and tools to help adolescents navigate mental health challenges, leaving us nervous, frustrated, misunderstood, or even rejected in moments when we want to show up for the people we love. We are pleased to have Sophie with us this evening to share from her story and offer advice on how we can best support adolescents in their mental health. A few announcements before we get started. If you enjoy hearing from Sophie tonight, we believe that your teenage children, your teenage students, or other teenagers in your life would enjoy learning with her on Monday evening, April 5th, as part of Greater Metro West Community Mitzvah Month. We'll be placing that registration link in the chat shortly. And also, as Rebecca alluded to just a few moments ago, we hope you'll join us for a second program in this series on April 22nd, when we hear from child psychologist and parenting expert, Dr. Becky Kennedy, who will be discussing and reframing developing confidence in our children and also ourselves. So stay tuned for registration for that event opening up later on this month. Some Zoom housekeeping as we get started. Today's Zoom is being recorded for archival purposes only. You have all been muted to minimize ambient noise. Sophie will answer participant questions following her talk. Please use the chat feature to ask your questions, and I will share them with Sophie, who will answer as many as possible. If you wish to ask a question privately, you can Zoom chat it to me directly at Justin Rosensmolin, and I will include it among the questions I ask Sophie. And now just a bit more about Sophie as she gets started. Sophie Riegel is a sophomore at Duke University who first discovered she had a mental illness in 7th grade. She is the author of Don't Tell Me to Relax, One Teen's Journey to Survive Anxiety and How You Can Do It Too, and Overcoming Overthinking, 36 Ways to Tame Anxiety for Work, School, and Life. Sophie is a mental health advocate who also has 4 different mental illnesses. She speaks openly about her experiences and has been featured on The Tamron Hall Show, Thrive Global, The Times of Israel, Psych Central, and more. She recently recorded her first TED Talk about mental health stigma and looks forward to writing her third book in the near future. And now it is my honor and pleasure to welcome Sophie Riegel.
Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to be here. First, I'm just going to start sharing my screen because I have a little PowerPoint for everyone. Do that up first. That would be good. Right. There we go. All right. So I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for the introduction, Justin. So today we're going to be talking about, when your help isn't helping and how can we help our kids and teens deal with mental illnesses, anxiety, etc. But before I begin, I want to tell you a little bit more about myself besides the brief bio that Justin gave. So a little bit about me. Right now I am a sophomore at Duke University. My experience with anxiety and mental illnesses. And the reason why, because of my personal experiences with mental illness. So a little bit about my story. When obsessive
Apologies for the technical difficulties. We'll get Sophie back in just a moment.
Am I back?
Welcome back.
Oh, thank you. I apologize. School Wi-Fi. So as I was saying, in seventh grade, I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder and trichotillomania, which is a hair pulling disorder. And I really, really struggled. And I actually was pretty severely bullied because of some of my odd obsessions, to the point where I didn't think like I'd be able to go to school anymore. And so I ended up going to a therapist who told me the only way to deal with people who bully you is to educate them. So I stood up, I was 12 years old, I stood up in front of my seventh grade class and gave a presentation on what it's like living with OCD and what it's like living with anxiety. And every single person who had bullied me came up to me and apologized. And I realized just how important education is. And I went home that day and I started writing my first book, Don't Tell Me to Relax. In 10th grade, I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and panic disorder. And it was so bad to the point that I didn't think I would graduate high school, let alone graduate as a valedictorian and go to Duke. I didn't know what my next day would look like. And I really couldn't imagine living like this any longer. I was really in a lot of emotional pain. And I could tell that my parents were trying to help, but didn't know how to deal with it. And I ended up trying lots of different medications, having a therapist, having the support of my family, and I adopted an 80-pound pit bull, who if you know my mom on Facebook, you know my pit bull Nash. She is my emotional support dog, and she is fantastic. And today I'm able to speak to you all because I have dealt with my mental illnesses, and I want to talk a lot to you all about how you can help your kids and teens deal with this as well. So I would love if everyone would type in the chat a response to this phrase. My kid/teen tends to ask for help when. If you could just type it in the chat, that would be great. So my answer would be, I don't have a kid or a teen, but I tend to ask for help when I feel like I have exhausted all of my other resources. I see when they're overwhelmed, when I'm around, when time has run out, when they're stressed, when it's convenient, when I'm overwhelmed and stressed, when it's the last resort. These are great. And I think I've made some progress because I used to respond to this phrase as I tend to ask for help, never. So now that I'm asking for help a little bit more, which is great. And I actually do a whole series about self-help strategies for those of us who don't like asking for help. I see a lot of great answers here. And I would love if everyone would type in the chat the response to my child/teen tends not to ask for help when. Always, I see always. When she's embarrassed, always. When she's emotionally flooded, when she's busy on the phone, when she thinks she should be able to handle it on her own, when she thinks it's going to make me mad, when it may embarrass her. And I think these are all reasons why us, meaning you all as adults, also tend not to ask for help in certain situations because you feel like you should be able to do it on your own. You're too overwhelmed. You're afraid it'll make someone upset or mad because it's inconvenient, any of those things. So I want to talk a little bit about a Venn diagram that my mom actually created. And I'm going to ask you to place yourself in one of these three circles. So the middle circle is we discuss mental health frequently and or openly at home. So if you're in this circle, you can type the number 1 in the chat. Number 2 would be we discuss mental health occasionally and or uncomfortably at home. And number 3 would be we don't really discuss mental health. So I'd love to know where you all stand. Lots of ones, that's great. 3, 2, 1, 2. We got a really nice mix of people here. 3, 1. Great. All right. So I see a lot of numbers. This is great. Great mix of everyone here. So my goal today is to get you, if you are on level 2, to get you to number 1. If you're on level 3, to get you to number 2. And if you are on number 1, for you to feel even more comfortable being there and to possibly help other people get there as well. Now, one more question. What makes talking about mental health with your teens so prickly? What makes it so challenging? You could type it in the chat. One thing that makes it hard to talk about. Stigma, fears, taboos, issues. Don't want to give her even more anxiety by discussing it. Not sure I'll say the right thing. It hurts when they are hurting. Not having answers. Not having the right answers. He won't discuss with me. Great. So I'm hoping we will touch on some of these today. And I'm going to go into, I think, 6 or 7 tips that I have about managing teen/kid anxiety and how to actually get the conversation started. And when we do get the conversation started, how to make sure we are saying the quote unquote right things. And just so you know, from someone who has a mental illness, saying nothing is almost always worse than saying something wrong. So people are scared of having this conversation. And I say, if you say nothing, that is worse than you trying to have the conversation and saying the wrong thing. So let's start with our first strategy. So our first strategy is treat your mental health like your physical health. And I gave a TED talk about this idea of we talk about and we think about our physical health way differently than we talk about mental health. So if we think about it, you would have no problem saying, I went to the orthodontist last week. But as soon as someone says, I went to the psychiatrist or I went to a therapist, there's immediately some sort of negative connotation or there's stigma surrounding our mental health. Also, if you think about this, if you were to break your leg, you wouldn't even think about, going to the emergency room to get a cast. But if you are having a panic attack or you are having a depressive episode, you don't have that same instinct to go get help. We tend to think to ourselves like, oh, it could be worse, or I'll wait until it is worse and then I will go get help. So we need to start thinking about our mental health the same way we do our physical health. For those of you with young kids, one thing that actually works really well is instead of calling it mental health, we can actually call it brain health. And what that does is it turns mental health, which feels very abstract, into a physical part of our body that is creating these emotions, our brain, right? And that will lead to the absence of stigma that is involved in talking about physical health. Another thing we often, that I noticed when I was doing research, is when we talk about mental health, we will often use terms like problem or issue. So we will say things like, someone has an issue with depression, someone has a mental health problem, right? These are very common phrases. But when we talk about physical health, no one says, I have a problem with cancer, or I have a diabetes issue. Like, these words just don't come up in our language when we talk about physical health. And what we need to do is actually shift the way we talk about mental health so that we can get rid of a lot of the stigma associated with it. So when you are having conversations with your teen or kid, be careful in how you talk about mental health, because you want to treat it the same way you treat your physical health. When I was growing up, my parents used to say, we have a team of doctors who are going to help us. And that includes the pediatrician, the orthodontist, whoever else, and the psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists, right? They never made a distinction between what they were helping us with. These are just a team of people who are trying to help us. And so if you can start integrating that language, integrating the word psychologist, psychiatrist into your kids and teens vocabulary, it makes it a lot less stigmatizing when you have to talk about it. And it makes it a lot more comfortable to have that conversation. I want to move on to my next strategy, which is actually similar to what I talked about, which is ask them where they feel it. So this is more geared towards younger kids. A lot of the times, younger kids don't have the language that they need to express, I feel anxious, I feel embarrassed, those sorts of things. But we tend to feel our emotions in our body. And when we can notice patterns of where our kids and teens are feeling these emotions, we can actually help them name the emotion that they're feeling. So for me, my neck gets really stiff when I'm feeling anxious. My lower back hurts. I feel like an 80-year-old, but I'm really only 20. And for a lot of people, their stress is in their chest. Wherever you feel it, you wanna ask your kid and teen where they're feeling their emotions so that you can get a better understanding of what is actually going on. And based on the idea of them not necessarily having the words to explain how they're feeling, I want to provide this resource of words to describe our emotions. And there's this idea that we call name it to tame it. So I actually read a study recently that said only 30% of people are able to accurately name their emotions. And I want everyone here today to be part of that 30%. And the way we do that is we practice. We practice picking words that describe how we're feeling, and we practice by asking someone else to describe how they're feeling in words other than the ones that are bolded. So everyone knows the words, I feel bad, scared, angry, sad, happy, these bold words. And these are the 7 main emotions that human beings feel. But the truth is, when we get more nuanced into how we're feeling, so when we get more specific, we can actually have more specific treatment in order to help our kids and teens deal with exactly what they're going through. Because let's be honest, feeling bad is very different than feeling sleepy. But sleepy is a subset of bad. But how would we know to get there if we don't ask our kid and teen to look at this list of words or to brainstorm a list of words to describe how they are feeling? And you might notice that 5 of the 7 main emotions are negative. And this is because these negative emotions are evolutionarily designed to protect us. So for example, we felt disgusted so that we didn't eat poison, or we felt fearful so that we didn't get eaten by a lion. Right? These emotions are here to protect us. And when we stop thinking about how do we suppress these emotions and start thinking about what is this emotion telling me, that is when we can start to actually make some change and some progress in the conversations we have related to mental health. So my mom likes to say emotion is data. And I call her a nerd every time she says that, but she says it. Emotion is data. Our emotions tell us what is important to us. If your kid is feeling anxious about a test, it means that achieving is really important to them. So we want to think about it, flip it that way. Instead of saying, I need to stop feeling anxious, you want to think about, what is this emotion telling me? The next slide is avoid putting things in perspective. And this is, I would say, the most important thing that I could share with everyone today. Adults tend to do this all the time. So here's a list of things that you all may have said before. Everything happens for a reason. It's all part of the journey. Be positive. Don't stress. Nobody will love you until you love yourself. That's a rough one. You just need to try harder. There's so many people who have it worse than you. Think of all that you have. Wow, but you don't look blank. That which does not kill us makes us stronger, and this too shall pass. I'm going to wait for 2 minutes to see if anyone would be willing to admit that they say any of these things. And if anyone can honestly say that they say none of these things, you can take my place and lead this workshop. Has anyone never said any of these things or anything related to these? I see toxic positivity. That's exactly what it is, toxic positivity, and I'm going to get to that soon. So I think almost everyone here, if not everyone, has said some of these things. And I'm not being judgmental when I say this. I'm sure I've said some of these things. It is just something to be aware of because I'm going to give you really great alternatives. So the reason why, as someone mentioned in the chat, that these aren't effective ways of helping someone is for a bunch of reasons, but one is these are known as toxic positivity. So, and the reason why we say these things is because we are uncomfortable in other people's negative emotions. So we are saying these things to try to get out of that feeling of discomfort. So when we really are able to help someone, we don't have to say these things because we can learn to be comfortable with sharing in someone's negative emotions. And the truth is, as a teen and as a young adult, we don't want to hear these things because in the moment, we don't want to know, we don't really care like it's going to feel better in a year from now. We care about what it feels like right now, and you giving us perspective isn't at all helpful. And I am fully aware that you all have very good intentions. But the thing is, when we put things in perspective, the intentions don't necessarily match the impact. And we want the impact to match the intention. So how can we do that? So these are a couple of alternatives that I have come up with my mom. So instead of saying what you saw on the previous slide, here are some things that you can say instead. This is hard. I believe you. I'm going to stay with you through this. I'm here for you. I wish I knew just what to say to you right now. I wish I could take the pain away. This really sucks. How can I help you? You have my support, and we don't have to talk. Let's just be together. What do people notice? I would love to hear in the chat. What do people notice about the difference between this slide and the previous slide? Validating, absolutely. Acknowledging their feelings. There's no fixing. Unconditional support, absolutely. Not trying to fix. Meeting them where they are. Empathy instead of sympathy. They're being seen and heard. Yeah. So these, I'm sure, match the intention you have, which is I really want to tell my kid that I'm there for them and that, you know, I want them to know that no matter what, like they can come to me for anything. And saying these things will make that impact. So I see something in Hebrew. Can't read that, but I'm sure it's something very helpful. Right. Another strategy I want to talk about is ask for help and be specific. And I want to tell a little more about myself to give some context for this. So my mom is a professional speaker, an executive coach. She teaches people these skills, presentation skills, emotional intelligence, and more. My dad is a trained civil engineer, which means he was literally trained to see problems and fix them. So when he learned about my mental illnesses, his first reaction was, how can I fix this? And what we had to talk to him about was, there's no fixing this, right? It's not like you're not going to find a puzzle piece that I can get that's going to magically make me whole again, right? There are a lot of other ways that you can help, but fixing it is not one of them. And for a really long time, for until I think I was about 18, so until 2 years ago, I really didn't feel comfortable talking to my dad about what was going on. And this really strained our relationship because I would talk to my mom all the time about how I was feeling, but I wouldn't talk to my dad. And it's because I knew if I told him what was going on, he would just try to fix it. And that is not what I wanted. I think our first instincts as human beings is when we see a problem is to fix it. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that we have this instinct, but in this case, most of the time, kids and teens just want to be heard and they don't want someone to fix it for them. So I've created a list of 15 ways that you can help your kid or teen that do not involve fixing it for them. And what you can do is you can say to your teen, hey, would you like me to listen without judgment? Use this as a menu of ways that you can possibly help. So would you like me to listen without judgment? Would you like me to ask open-ended questions or brainstorm new ideas or empathize or connect you to someone or teach you a skill or share my own experience or give you a pep talk, help you prioritize? Maybe I can take notes while you download your thoughts or help you develop evaluation criteria. Excuse me. Or I can do it with you, or I can send you articles and videos or other resources, or I can fix it for you, which is often, excuse me, not an option at all because a lot of these problems that come up cannot be fixed. I would love to know which one of these do you use right now, or do you think would be helpful to use in the future? And you can just put a number down. Which one of these strategies, 1 through 15, do you think would be most helpful to use with your kid or teen? Listen without judgment, develop evaluation criteria, prioritize, take notes, multiple. Great. And I know there's lots of great stuff in here, so I will be sending Justin the PDF of the PowerPoint that I have, so you don't have to take notes right now. You will have it available for you for whenever you want to access it. The next strategy is, ask them what kind of friend they need. And I'm gonna say a word that is inappropriate, and I'm 20 years old and I'm an adult and I can do it because my mom is not here. So there are two kinds of friends that we need when we are talking about mental health. The first kind is called the sit in the shit friend. This is the person who is going to sit in whatever mess, whatever problem you're dealing with, and just not try to get you to move out of it, just sit there with you. So a lot of using empathy and those sorts of things. Excuse me. So we have the sit in the shit friend. The second kind of friend we have is called the pull me out of the poop friend. So this is the friend that you use that you need when you've been in this problem for a while and you need to get unstuck. So my dad is a perfect pull you out of the poop friend. What you want for your kid or teen is, and it doesn't have to be you, is for them to find a friend that can do each of these things. So a friend who is really good at sitting with you and acknowledging and validating your feelings, and another friend who is really good at getting you unstuck out of the problem that you feel like you really just can't get out of alone. And oftentimes people are good at one of these things and not both of these things. My mom happens to be an example of someone who is good at both of these things. But so we want to look for someone who can do one of these things, and it doesn't have to be you, but these are the two kinds of friends, and friends can be adults that your kids and teens need when they're in a tricky situation. I would love to know, which kind of friend do you tend to be the most? Or are you best at? see. Second. The first. First for my friends, second for my kids. Interesting. First, a hybrid. So great mix here. And it's great that you can acknowledge which kind of person you are, because then you're able to decide which situations you are best equipped to help in. So, I was lucky in that I had one parent who was really good at one and another parent who was really good at another. But for a lot of people, you need to search for the person who is best well equipped to help you in these sort of situations. Now, I know you answered which is the person you are the most. I would love to know which is the person you tend to need the most. Number one, 2, 1. Depends. So also a really great mix here as well. What sometimes happens, and I think it's always really funny, is everyone says they're really good at the second one, and then they say they really need the first one. And we realize that there's this huge mismatch going on where we need people who are good at the first one, but everyone says they're good at the second one. So what I'm trying to do is sort of train everyone to gain some of the skills that someone who's really good at the first one would be able to do. And that's why I'm talking about toxic positivity. That's why I'm talking about how do we not put things in perspective and those sorts of things. Strategy number 6, I like to talk about is asking for feedback. So there's this quote that I think is really funny. Honest criticism is hard to take, particularly from a relative, a friend, an acquaintance, or a stranger. So basically, criticism is hard to take from anyone. And the thing is, when we are having conversations with our kids and teens, we won't know if it went well until after the conversation. And what we want to do is ask them what we could do better next time, because we always want to build a better support network for our teens, have a more productive conversation and that sort of thing. And the instinct that people have is to ask them immediately after the conversation, hey, did that go well? Like, what was that like for you? Which is a great question to ask, but we don't want to ask it right after the conversation because a few reasons. One, we want to let the conversation sink in for the kid and teen. And also we want to get feedback when the teen is not feeling stressed or depressed or anxious. So that will make them more able to articulate clearly how the conversation went for them. And if you are going to ask for feedback, you need to be open to having your kid tell you what they did not like, right? You can't just go in hoping that they're going to say, oh, everything went great. When you go in for feedback, you need to be open to the idea of them saying, mom, dad, parent, aunt, uncle, cousin, this didn't go well. You did not help me, right? That is a great piece of feedback that they can give, and you need to be open to accepting it. And when they do that, what you can ask is, what would be better for you next time? And when we keep having this kind of feedback, we're able to have these more productive conversations. So I have a few minutes left, and I want to just touch on a few things that I didn't mention yet. And then I'm going to take some time to answer some questions. So the first thing I want to talk about is for adults who have kids and teens with mental illnesses, it can be really challenging for them, for the parents. And what I recommend for parents is getting help for themselves, because oftentimes kids and teens will refuse to get help, but the thing you can control is you getting help. So how you can get help by going to a psychiatrist who can help you deal with, why is my kid not talking to me? Or this is really hard. I don't know what to do. I feel stuck. You want to get help for those feelings before they become unmanageable. Another thing to mention is that teens and kids need to talk to someone, and it does not have to be you, and it sometimes shouldn't be you. And parents hate when I say that. This is their least favorite advice that I give. But I think after a few months, they come back to me and they realize, oh, that was pretty good advice. So yeah, they need to talk to someone. So this can be a teacher, a guidance counselor, a cousin, an uncle, a friend's parent, anyone. It does not have to be you. And I know that is hard. And I don't understand how hard it is because I'm not a parent, but I'm sure one day I will understand and I will apologize to everyone for giving that advice. But I still think it is valid to think about that. Also, a little bit more about my experience. I am not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. So I cannot diagnose your kids and I cannot give medical advice. But what I can say is there is a lot of stigma associated with medication related to mental health. And I know for me, I was really, really scared of using medication because a few reasons. One is my anxiety was the reason why I was so successful. It drove me to do all these things and work hard, and that made me really successful. So I was worried that when I took medication, it would take that part of me away and I wouldn't be myself anymore. And I also worried, there are lots of side effects associated with any medication, and especially medication that is related to mental health. But I can honestly tell you I would not be here today if I hadn't taken medication. I don't know if I would have survived long enough to be here. I can tell you honestly that medication saved my life, and I'm not saying go out and get your kids medication, but I do want to say that there are things that are going to be uncomfortable for you that you might need to sacrifice in order to help your kid. So if you have your own ideas about what your kids should and shouldn't do, that is great. And I want you all to be open-minded and think about what can be possible if we open our mind to other possibilities that might make us uncomfortable. I know a lot of kids and teens whose parents won't let them take medication and because of their own whatever reasons they have, which is fine. Every parent is allowed to do whatever they feel like they can do is best for their child. But I think, at least for me, medication saved my life and it is an option to consider. I think I have like 2 minutes left. So I'm just going to do a quick plug for my books. If you're interested in either of my books, so my first book, Don't Tell Me to Relax, details my experience with a couple of mental illnesses, my journey from 5th grade through high school, and also advice to parents, teens, and educators. If you are interested in that, you can go to sophieregal.com. I think someone will put it in the chat. If you're interested in the other book, Overcoming Overthinking, I co-wrote that with my mom. And those are 36 tips that we came up with together for how to manage anxiety in work situations, in school situations, and just for any situation in general. So if you're interested in that, that'll also be on the website. And I know we're going to move into questions, but if anyone has a question that they don't feel like asking in the chat, or if they don't think of it yet and think of it after the presentation, I will give everyone my email address. So you are welcome to email me with any questions and or put me in touch with your teens. I'm always happy to have a chat with everyone. I just want to thank everyone so much for participating and for giving me the opportunity to speak to you all today.
Thank you so much for your really important and uplifting talk, Sophie. It's just so wonderful, and we benefit so much from your honesty and candor and wisdom and warmth. So thank you. So we're going to be placing some of the resources you alluded to just now in the chat, and also my colleague Jerry Russo is going to place some additional resources coming your way from Jewish Federation of Greater Metro West New Jersey and our partners, Jewish Family Service of Metro West New Jersey. And now I am pleased to turn over the floor to questions, but a few folks have written to me in the chat asking about the recording for tonight's Zoom. So we are not able to share this recording publicly. We so appreciate you being here in the virtual room with us. We are pleased to share the slide deck that you've created, Sophie, with these terrific resources for everyone, and that will be going out in a follow-up email, which everyone will get tomorrow. And we'll also include your contact information, Sophie, in the chat and in that email as well. So just a couple of other questions coming in, and I'm going to try to get to as many as we can. So one of our participants asked earlier on, Sophie, what if our child can't communicate how we could be more helpful? How do we figure that out?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would love to know a little bit more about the situation, but excuse me. In general, I think it's very possible that your kid is able to communicate to someone else how they're feeling and what's not helpful. So you can kind of have a person there who they feel comfortable talking to and who will relay the message to you. And also there are ways to read body language and emotions to actually figure out and think about how a person's feeling or how, what ways the person can give feedback. So for example, if your kid is in a conversation with you and they're sitting there like this, right? They don't need to tell you that it's not going well. You can see that it's not going well. But if they lean forward and they're nodding their head, you can see that it's going well as well. So you don't need verbal cues to know what exactly is going on.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Another question. Can you talk about a time in your life when an adult didn't get it right the first time in terms of supporting you, but was able to rebound, and then you were able to strengthen that relationship and you got the support you needed?
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned earlier about my dad. My dad is a trained engineer, so he is trained to see problems and solve them. And when he found out about my mental illnesses, he wanted to do whatever it took to solve it, to fix it, to make me whole again. And for a really long time, I wouldn't talk to him about it because I didn't want him to fix it. And also because my mom has mental illnesses as well. So she has a couple of anxiety disorders as well. And he doesn't. So I just was like, he doesn't get it, right? He's not going to understand. So I really lost trust in his ability to help me after he continually tried to fix it. And I really had to sit down and have a conversation with him, telling him first that I know his intention is good. And I really am grateful that he wants to support me and help me. And here's the way to do it in a way that feels more helpful. So that might be one of the only relationships I've had with an adult who didn't get it right the first time.
Thank you so much for sharing. We all really benefit from your vulnerability and your authenticity in these ways. I have another question that follows up on intent versus impact, but just a friendly invitation to everyone. If you would like to ask Sophie a question, we're so pleased to have her here with us. So please use the chat feature to do so. If you prefer to ask a question privately, again, you can put it in the chat to me, Justin Rosen-Smolin. So Sophie, this question is, can you help us understand the difference between intention and impact? Can you dive into that a bit more, and why this is so important when it comes to supporting our loved ones with their mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So I think first, like, to get this straight, I think we all have the intention of helping our kid or teen. The impact of whatever we do might be making a teen or kid not want to go to you again, or making them more frustrated, or making them feel isolated. And so when we have the intention of, I want to help my kid and teen, we need to think about, if I say this, what is my teen or kid going to think? So if you say, for example, it'll all feel better tomorrow, your kid and teen is going to think, this sucks. My parent doesn't understand. Why don't they understand? Why don't they get me? This isn't helpful. I'm not going to go to my parent again. Your intention was to help them. The impact was they're not going to come to you again. So we want to have those two things match. So a lot of what it talks about was the toxic positivity. We don't want to say things like, this too shall pass, or you'll feel better in a week from now. We want to say, this must feel really hard. Because when we say this must feel really, really hard, our intention is to validate their feelings and to make them feel better, our impact is the exact same thing. And we want to have those two match.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Another question for you. So we have parents here and teachers here of children spanning a wide range of ages and grades, and many in a very weird time are going to be making this transition from high school to post-high school, which for some will include college, for others maybe a gap year, for others maybe something vocational or training of some sort. Tell us a little bit what you've observed among you and your peers when it comes to the support that young people really need when they leave their home, and how that might be a bit different.
Sorry, I was muted. I always mention this when people ask, what do you recommend? Things like that. I always, the first thing I always say is, I have no experience with not having a supportive family that I could fall back on. I have zero experience with that. So it's very hard for me to give advice in that realm, but I am able to say for kids, for teens who are moving on from high school, what their goal is to really find something they're passionate about. And if they don't have a support system that's going to take care of their mental and physical health, then that isn't something that is going to be a priority. So I don't know if you know about this, but there's something called the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we need to fulfill the basic needs first. And that is, we need psychological safety, we need food, water, physical safety. And then we can move towards things like, what am I passionate about? What do I want to do in the future? What kind of changes do I want to make in my life? So we need to make sure that those basic level things are fulfilled first.
Thanks for that. Have you observed among your peers a difference in sort of how their parents who are really sort of leaning into the relationship and learning some of these strategies versus not? And, because I think a lot of people, feel uncertain sort of in that moment of transition, what type of support they really need to provide. And I know that's a very pivotal moment.
Yeah. So for a lot of my friends who don't have the kind of relationship that I have with my parents, they often feel a little bit lost, and they don't quite know where to turn to. And lucky enough for me in college, they have all these resources that my college provides for them to have support. But for people who don't have that support, or for people whose relationship with their parents isn't super strong, often they look elsewhere for support, and that support isn't usually what a parent would want for their kid. So, one example is, I know someone who didn't have a good relationship with their family, wanted to reach out, tried to mend things with their family. That didn't work, and they ended up turning to people who would take care of them on the streets. So people who were dealing drugs and those sorts of things, just because they didn't have the support of their family. And I'm not saying that if you don't have a supportive family, you're going to be a drug dealer. I'm definitely not saying that at all. I'm just saying that we turn to other outlets that are most convenient for us, and often the most convenient ones are not the most helpful ones.
Thank you so much for that. And just wanted to share again that we'll be sharing some additional resources from Jewish Federation Greater Metro West New Jersey and our partners, Jewish Family Services, so you can continue to support the young people in your life in these ways. We have a question that came in just a little while ago. Someone is curious how you went from battling so many debilitating mental health issues to going to a mainstream university and becoming a public speaker. It's inspiring. So I don't know if you want to do that al regal achat, on one foot.
Yeah, I mean, I ask myself that question all the time because I don't quite know the answer. I mean, I don't think there was like a moment that things just turned around, but I think, over the years of having therapy, medication, and having the support of my family really did shift things for me. And I also started to have the realizations that my grades didn't mean everything, that I don't need to get an A+ in every single class in order to be a successful human being. Like, my worth is measured in things other than test grades and things like that. And that was a huge source of anxiety for me. And when I had that realization, and And I realized, my life is worth more than what my school is telling me, like than this piece of paper. I was able to let myself be who I wanted to be a little more. And I think because I had so many mental illnesses and because I was struggling so much, I was willing to do anything it took to A, not feel that way, and B, to help other people not feel that way too. So I was definitely willing to put out my story, even if it meant like I would feel embarrassed, I'd feel vulnerable, if it meant that just one other person wouldn't have to go through what I went through. And I think that's where things started to shift for me.
That's really inspiring. Thank you so much. I have a few more questions, but one question about your book. Some folks want to know, your books, are they appropriate for children? And if so, what ages? Or are they more for parents? How would you describe the audience?
Yeah, so the first book, so Don't Tell Me to Relax, I would say, I'm going to preface this with there are a couple of F-bombs in the book. So you as a parent can make that choice for your kid. But I would say 11 plus should be able to read the book. And the other book, as well as parents and adults, the other book, I would say maybe 13 plus, just because there's some like psychological whatever in there. It's a little more, less like I'm telling a story and more here's the scientific evidence of what works. So adults and 13 plus for that one, I would say.
Thank you so much. A few other questions here. So a few folks have asked, what about teens who feel like they're the only ones? And what about people in your life who might push you away or minimize or deny if there are any issues? People not ready to really see what's happening and really, how they're feeling. How would you recommend you're navigating those situations? And I would say, I think, what's been effective in moments where you've been in that boat, and what got you to open up a bit more?
So the first part of the question was, what do you do if a teen feels like they're the only one? What you do is you talk to me. You can go online, you can search my name. There are tons of articles that I wrote about not being the only one. And also, if you go online and search statistics, you will see 1 in 5 Americans have a mental illness. So clearly we're not, you're not the only one. And there are also tons of Facebook support groups that I'm actually in where people just talk about, what it's like living with anxiety, what it's like living with trichotillomania, and where you can feel that support without having to be super vulnerable. And also, if you are dealing with people and there are tons of these people out there who don't believe mental illness is a thing. They believe, oh, it just means you're weak or whatever they think. Just don't surround yourself with those people, because you will be able to find someone who believes you and someone who completely supports you. So get rid of that negativity, cut that relationship off where it is, because you don't want that mindset to influence how you treat your mental health.
Thank you so much for that thoughtful answer. Just a few more questions coming in. If you could just hang on one moment. So I have a question to ask in just a moment, but I also want to say, and I alluded to the resource guide we're going to share from our partners, Jewish Family Service, that Sophie, your inspiring and really important talk this evening is a way of providing us with some inspiration and some advisement when it comes to supporting young people with their mental health. Of course, this hour-long talk does not replace therapy, health and medical interventions as needed for your family, et cetera. And so in the resource guide we're going to be sharing from JFS, you can find out a little bit more about how Jewish Family Service can support you in supporting your family with mental health, with their social workers, with connecting you with other providers in our community, et cetera. And finally, the last question, which I think is a really nice one. Where do you see this advocacy and this authorship and your interest in the field of mental health and speaking on behalf of these crucial issues going?
This is also a question I ask myself all the time. I get this question and people say, oh, do you want to do this as a career when you're older? I want to do this for as long as I feel inspired to do this. I don't want to do this because other people are saying I need to do this. Right now, I feel really good about the work I'm doing, and I'm going to continue to do it as long as I'm helping people and feel motivated based on my own emotions and interests. As a career, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just, I'm a 20-year-old kid trying to figure out life just like every other 20-year-old kid. But I do see myself working as a mental health advocate, whether it's professionally or not, in the future until my work is unnecessary. And when it's unnecessary, it means that everything is going really smoothly, and that there are tons of other people there who are able to do the work that I do. And that's why I do this work, so that I can start to train other people to do it as well, so that we can spread the message across the board. And so it's not just me. But yeah, in general, I am going to do this for as long as it feels helpful for other people.
Terrific. Thank you. Sophie, thank you so much for an engaging and enriching talk this evening. I know I am personally leaving with some helpful suggestions and tools to better support the young people in my life with their mental health. And I know you provided the same for close to 200 members of the Greater Metro West NJ community, which is just incredible. So thank you for sharing your time and your wisdom with us. Just a few more announcements before we close, which we will also post in the Zoom chat. First, I hope you will check out that mental health resource guide produced in partnership with Jewish Family Service of Metro West, New Jersey. If you or someone you know is in danger of harming themselves or others, please immediately contact one of the services listed in another guide we are sharing from JFS, or of course, call 911 or go to your nearest emergency room. Second, once again, for your teenage children and students, please encourage them to join Sophie on April 5th for Letters Against Depression, part of JFGMW Community Mitzvah Month. And be sure to check out some other volunteer opportunities happening in our community on that same page. You can contact Sophie directly at sophielregal@gmail.com. And of course, check out her website with links to her book and some other resources as well. We'll be pasting that website in the chat in just a moment. And finally, if you enjoyed this evening's program, please join us again on April 22nd for a talk with child psychologist and parenting expert, Dr. Becky Kennedy. Dr. Becky will discuss and reframe developing confidence in our children and ourselves, and registration will open up later on this month, so please be on the lookout. Sophie, thank you again for joining us, and I'm just going to turn it over briefly to my colleague, Rebecca Hinden, who's going to close.
Thank you so much. Just one more thank you to all of you for coming, and a special thank you to our anonymous, generous funder for investing in mental health education and our day school community, for our day school teachers, our day school students, and our general community at large. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a great evening.